Good evening, Americans, and welcome to the Ed Show live from New York. Let's get to work.
We are following some breaking news out of the coast of Australia.
Prime Minister Tony Abbott announced what could be a major breakthrough.
Whitish objects on or perhaps just under the surface of the Indian Ocean.
Those parts could have moved any direction.
An aircraft will find an object if it is findable.
Retrieving those objects will not be easy.
17 days until the batteries on those underwater locating pingers run out.
This is the best possible lead they have.
But they can't be certain that it's part of this jet. They can't until they get down there.
How do they try to confirm that information?
This story is about the 239 souls on board.
We have been following every single lead.
Relatives are hanging on every word.
This time, I just hope that it is positive.
Good to have you with us tonight, folks. Thanks for watching. We begin the show tonight with the latest on the aircraft. There are new developments in the search for the missing Malaysian Airlines flight number 370. Australian officials say that they spotted two objects on satellite that could be from the missing aircraft off the coast of Perth, Australia. At this point, it's still unknown if the objects are from the Boeing 777. The search has been suspended overnight, but it's expected to resume within this hour. Now, one object is roughly 79 feet long. The other is 17 feet long, picked up on satellite. Now, it's really the best lead in the search for the plane since it went missing 13 days ago. Steve Handelsman of NBC News has the latest.
The theory of aviation investigators in Washington seems to be validated by the just revealed but 4-day-old satellite images that appear to show two big pieces of an airliner floating on the Indian Ocean. American experts calculated Malaysian Flight 370 took the southern route after it turned, and the Boeing 777's communications were purposely turned off. The Malaysian government today called the photos a credible lead.
It must be stressed that these sightings, while credible, are still to be confirmed.
And at first light, where it's already Friday, Australian and U.S. search teams head back out. The goal is to find floating pieces of the airliner, calculate how far they drifted in the 12 days since Flight 370 disappeared, and send probes to the ocean floor for the cockpit voice recorder, the flight data recorder, and the main wreckage. Investigator John Cox told me recover them and the mystery will end.
I believe we'll solve it. It'll be with the recorders. It'll be with the wreckage. Put it all together. Yes, I think we'll solve it.
The satellite images upset some Flight 370 family members. But the mother of the American passenger, Philip Woods, says she's calm.
Whatever the end of this is, we have a deep faith in God, and we will be relieved to find out for sure.
The first step could be locating the pieces of the plane, if that's what they are, floating in the vast Indian Ocean.
You can just imagine the anguish the families are going through. Investigators were able to narrow satellite signals from the plane, creating two possible search paths. The new search area is roughly 1,500 miles southwest of Perth, Australia. It's out there. 4 military aircraft, an Australian Navy ship, and a Norwegian car-carrying freighter have been dispatched to the area. The aircraft consist of two P-3 Orion surveillance planes, a United States P-8 Poseidon intelligence plane, and a C-130 Hercules that will drop buoys down into the water onto the ocean to track the currents of the water. Now, the Norwegian vessel, Ho St. Petersburg, was the first ship to arrive on the scene. The ship is currently searching for that debris. And of course, this area of the southern Indian Ocean is extremely dangerous. It's deep, rough water. The search area depth ranges from 9,800 feet to 16,000 feet. Almost amazing to think that we could be able to recover something if this is the plane. Last night, there were 10-foot seas in the area. Seas are expected to increase to over 10 to 20 feet over the next day. If there are any new developments, obviously, in this hour, we will bring them to you. But how do you feel about this? Get your cell phones out. I want to know how you feel about what this latest development is. Do you believe this is the plane? Text A for yes, text B for no to 67622. You can always go to our blog at ed.msnbc.com. We'll bring you the results later on in the show. I want to bring in Carey Walsh, a salvage master at Global Diving and Salvage. Carey, good to have you with us tonight. I appreciate your time. Give us an idea, from your expertise, give us an idea of how hard it is to retrieve something from the bottom of the ocean if we're dealing with depths beyond 10,000 feet.
Well, Ed, you know, the very first order of business is going to be locating the debris. Assuming that this floating debris that they've spotted is, in fact, from the airplane, and some of my peers have speculated that it's not, just based on the fuzzy images that we've seen. Some people are thinking they may be ISO containers lost overboard from a ship. But should it prove to be true, of course, we'll have to do a backtrack and do the set and drift calculations to figure out where the debris originated. Go back to that location, and probably the basic tools that will be used to locate it will be a side scan sonar towed from a ship. The ship manned to operate 24 hours a day. They would tow a distance off the bottom with a search pattern similar to mowing your lawn, going back and forth with the side scan, probably taking swaths a little bit less than 1 kilometer wide, looking for the debris in real time. If they spot something on the bottom, they would turn around, go back, and get a closer look at it. Once that debris is identified, then they would have to come up with a plan for recovery based on what they found.
And that, of course, in 10 to 20-foot seas would be awfully tough to do. Give us an idea of how hard it is operating in those conditions.
Well, the side scan sonar wouldn't be very hard at all. It'd just be a matter of hanging on and putting up with a seasick crew, I guess. But the side scan would be deep underwater and on a towed array, so it would be very stable underwater. The crew would be watching the monitors, looking for things. Now, once it was located and you saw the debris field and the spread of the debris and the pieces and the sizes that had to be recovered, you would go back to the drawing board and come up with a plan and assemble the resources that you would need to do that correctly and expeditiously.
Well, 1,500 miles offshore, if this is the aircraft, what do you think the chances of recovering the black box would be? Would a camera go down there to give you an idea of what you're dealing with?
Yeah, I think once you've located the debris field, the next step would be to send down a remote operated vehicle, ROV, with the capability with high resolution cameras, low light cameras, lots of lights, manipulators, and be able to go in and move things around, depending again entirely on what they found and what the sizes of the debris would be. You could probably go in and dissect that thing with a ROV and recover the box.
So you feel, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but how confident do you feel that if the debris field is found on the bottom of the ocean, that the black box would be recovered?
I think that if they find the debris field, that the box will be recovered for sure. With the tools that we have available in our toolkits as salvage, we're pretty confident that you're going to be able to go down and recover the black box and the airplane itself.
I know it's hard to speculate. So much of this is speculation and trying to figure out exactly what happened. And that's the fascination of it all. Do you think this is the plane? And I know it's hard to come to render any kind of judgment off a couple of satellite images.
I really don't know. I think that it's interesting that it tracks with the projected NTSB flight paths, but it also, these images were taken days ago, so you'd have to do a set and drift calculation to see where they actually would have impacted and begun their drift pattern based on the timing. So I think it's really speculative at this point. I really don't know. I hope it is.
The other thing about these drift patterns that you're talking about, can you get it down into a narrow area? And how precise can that be when you get information on the drift patterns?
Well, I think that with the tools we have, the satellite images and the data buoys that are out there, and I'm not really that familiar with the Roaring 40s, but the set and drift information should be backward traceable to put it into a pretty close area, I would assume.
Okay. Carey Walsh, I appreciate your time tonight. Thanks for joining us on The Ed Show. Now let's turn to military-trained pilot and aviation attorney Daniel Rose and also retired airline captain Tom Bunn, author of SOAR, the Breakthrough Treatment for the Fear of Flying. Gentlemen, great to have you with us tonight. Mr. Rose, your assessment of today's developments.
Well, you know, unfortunately, I think it still leaves us in pretty much the same place we were yesterday, and that is, you know, even assuming that you have located parts of the plane, that's not a dispositive fact of anything. Ultimately, what we want to know is what caused this crash, where's the plane, what caused the crash, and it'd certainly be great if it turned out to be part of the plane. First and foremost, for the family, I think they'll start to have some kind of closure. I mean, this is, as you pointed out, just a terrible, horrific, and anguishing event. But it will lead, you know, certainly eliminate the hijacking. The plane is located somewhere in a secret base, somewhere to be used again. That would be out of the picture. And it would help us locate the plane and get to the bottom of what happened. But the part itself, I don't think, assuming it is part of the aircraft, is really going to help us understand whether it was deliberate or mechanical.
Captain Bunn, let's assume that this is the aircraft. It would lead me to believe that the pilots were incapacitated, that this aircraft would fly so long, or it would be a highly unusual suicide mission.
It strikes me as very hard to believe that if someone was going to do suicide, they would have that joyride like that. In the times, I think, 2 times we've had pilot suicides, that was not the case. It happened pretty quickly.
Do you have any reservation about whether the aircraft could have flown that far with the fuel that it had, to your knowledge?
Well, yeah, the plane could fly that far. That's not a problem. What the question is of course, did we come up with the right place to look? That still is not completely clear.
If this is not the plane, where does it leave us, you think?
We're
back to square one?
Yeah, it's just as Daniel just said, we're back to square one.
Daniel, your thoughts if this is not part of the debris field?
Yeah, clearly. I mean, you know, I think there's a reason we're looking down south. It seems to make more sense. You had the turn back towards the south, you know, assuming it's some kind of incapacitation, whether mechanically or deliberately induced. You have to assume the plane, in all likelihood, continued on that path, combined with the fact that nobody's seen it up north, no radars apparently have tracked it up north. You know, you got to look in that area, but that's a big part of the world. There's a lot of water there.
What about the durability and longevity of the black box? There's been a lot of speculation about exactly what would be collected on this black box and its survivability and what you could actually get out of it. Is there a life expectancy to what we can get out of the black box?
Well, first and foremost, there's a life expectancy as to the pingers on board that's going to help us find it. That's about 30 days. But the next life expectancy kind of or timeline you got to deal with is the fact that the cockpit voice recorder is only going to record, you know, half an hour back, which is probably not going to give us a whole lot of insight into what happened, you know, 4 or 5 hours earlier. And the DFDR, the flight data recorder, that's the other black box, is also limited in what it's going to record time-wise. So, you know, I think I don't suspect, unless it takes years and years to find it, that you're going to have the actual data compromised. But the real question is, once you pull that data up, how useful is it going to be in actually figuring out what happened? It'll be the best evidence we have, but maybe limited.
Tom, what about the ELT?
Yeah, well, we haven't heard anything from the ELT. If the ELT gets dropped in the water, it's supposed to start up, but if it's not...
That's an electronic locating transmitter. Yeah. So when there's an impact to the aircraft, the ELT engages and sends off a signal.
But we didn't get it. And that's the other thing that's why this thing is such a mystery.
Well, this is something that hasn't been discussed. The ELT, this is in every aircraft. And when there is an abrupt stoppage of the fuselage, by FAA requirement, every plane has to have an ELT. How sophisticated is the ELT on this aircraft? And what does it tell you if we never got an ELT signal?
I don't know. It seems to me that if the plane hit the water and the ELT was free enough that it could activate and the transmitter antenna would get the signal out there, it should work. But once again, this is another thing. We don't know why the ELT is not giving out that signal that other airplanes could pick up.
And to my knowledge, the ELT cannot be disarmed or disabled by the pilot.
It's a separate self-contained unit.
That is the mystery, I think, of a lot of this. Daniel, what do you think?
No, I agree. Again, you got to remember, I mean, it's like any other device. It has a limited range. You're not going to hear it everywhere, and we're in a pretty remote part of the world.
But if you've got a Poseidon over there, an intelligence aircraft, and it's in the area, and that ELT, would it still be going after 2 weeks?
Right. Well, maybe. I mean, the other point is maybe the impact with the water was not that abrupt.
Yeah.
And maybe it was a glide, and it may have been controlled, but even if it wasn't, even if it was just a somewhat of a glide in, it may not have triggered it.
Okay, Daniel Rose and Tom Bunn, great to have you gentlemen with us tonight. Thanks so much. Remember to answer tonight's question there at the bottom of the screen. Share your thoughts with us on Twitter at Ed Show and on Facebook. We want to know what you think.